palace that no one could survive. The alien queen's palace floated like a jewel above the capital city of Xerion, its crystalline towers piercing the sky and shimmering with violet light that could be seen from orbit. Inside this palace, beyond golden gates guarded by elite warriors and beyond gravity-shifting corridors meant to intimidate visitors, lay a nursery that had become the most feared room in the entire empire. It was not a prison, but everyone treated it like one. For inside lived the twin heirs of the alien queen, brilliant, powerful, and utterly uncontrollable. Their names were whispered like curses among palace staff, because anyone who entered their domain left either crying, limping, or vowing never to return. Every nanny, no matter how well trained, had fallen. Some were telekinetically thrown into fountains. Others found themselves trapped in upside-down rooms for hours. One veteran nanny once claimed she had cared for warlord hatchlings on a volcanic world. Yet, after 2 days with the twins, she ran through the palace screaming, begging for a transport off the planet. The twins delighted in chaos. Their strange alien powers amplified their mischief. They could bend light, override the palace's security grids, and speak telepathically to each other to coordinate attacks like tiny generals. One would distract while the other set traps. They treated nannies like pieces in a game, and no one had ever won against them. The queen herself had tried to discipline them, but her royal presence only made them more creative in their defiance. She stood in the surveillance chamber night after night, watching new nannies crumble one after another. Her patience thinned with each resignation. The royal council whispered that perhaps the twins were a curse from the ancient stars, destined to drive their caretakers insane. Others said they were simply too intelligent, too powerful, and too alien to be contained by ordinary methods. In truth, the palace had given up hope. The job of royal nanny was now a death sentence for one's career. Amid this silent chaos walked a man no one noticed. Daniel was a human janitor, one of the many humans working in the palace since diplomatic ties had opened decades ago. He wore a plain gray uniform, pushed a cleaning cart through the echoing halls, and never interfered in palace affairs. The guards barely glanced at him, nobles ignored him, and even the palace AI only registered him as maintenance. Yet Daniel had been observing quietly for years. He saw nannies come and go, he heard their terrified whispers in the staff quarters, and he watched the twins from a distance during his late-night cleaning shifts. Something about their wild energy and the way they stared at the stars from their balcony fascinated him. He sensed beneath the mischief a strange loneliness. One stormy night, as alien lightning lit up the palace sky in bursts of green fire, Daniel found himself near the nursery corridor. Alarms blared, guards scrambled, and another nanny burst out of the doors covered in glowing ink and robotic feathers. Screaming that she quit, the twins' laughter echoed down the hallway like a challenge to the universe. Everyone backed away. Everyone except Daniel. He stood at the edge of the chaos, mop still in hand, and made a decision that would change not only his life but the destiny of the alien heirs and the empire itself. He stepped forward, calm as a still ocean. While the guards shouted at him to stop, he didn't stop. For the first time, someone walked toward the storm instead of running from it. In the surveillance chamber, the queen leaned forward, intrigued. A human janitor was entering the nursery not by command, but by choice. No one had ever dared do that before. The palace held its breath as the doors closed behind him. The twins, sensing a new presence, turned their glowing eyes toward the entrance, unaware that their greatest game was about to begin. The job nobody wanted. The following morning, the palace corridors buzzed with rumors. Word spread fast among the alien staff and guards that a human janitor had entered the twins' nursery during the chaos and had not been thrown out, vaporized or teleported into the waste ducts like so many before him. The queen's advisors held private discussions, debating whether to punish the man for overstepping his station or to let the spectacle continue. They were curious, but most were convinced he would not last a single day. The palace had seen warriors, scholars, telepaths, and elite caregivers crumble under the twins' relentless games. What chance did a human janitor have, later that day, The royal court gathered in the great audience chamber. Towering pillars lined with glowing alien script rose around the room, and the queen sat upon her throne of crystalline metal. Her gaze was sharp, her expression controlled. But there was a spark of interest in her eyes as Daniel was brought before her. He stood in his simple uniform, hands steady, eyes calm, facing a room filled with nobles who considered him beneath their notice. The queen's voice echoed through the chamber as she asked him why he had stepped into the nursery. Daniel answered simply that he had seen too many people give up, and someone had to stay long enough to understand the children. His words were plain, almost humble, yet they carried a quiet strength that made even the guards exchange uneasy looks. The queen announced a challenge to him in front of everyone. She declared that if he could manage the twins for more than one standard cycle, a period that had broken every nanny before, he would not only be rewarded but recognized by the royal court. The nobles laughed softly, their whispers filled with mockery. To them, this human was just another doomed caretaker who would be gone by sunset. The twins themselves, watching the event through hidden palace feeds, exchanged mischievous telepathic laughter. They were excited. A new player had stepped onto their board, and they were ready to test him harder than anyone before. When Daniel walked toward the nursery for his official first day, the entire staff watched from afar. Some stood at balconies. Others gathered near security monitors. It felt less like a job appointment and more like someone walking into an arena. The heavy doors slid open with a hiss, and he stepped inside alone. Immediately, the room transformed into a battlefield. Toys floated like drones preparing for attack. Gravity shifted in sharp bursts, and both twins appeared in flashes of light, their eyes glowing as they circled him like predators examining prey. Their psychic laughter echoed in his mind, sharp and teasing. Instead of reacting with fear or aggression, Daniel calmly pushed his cleaning cart into the room and began picking up the mess. He straightened furniture, collected scattered alien devices, and even whistled a soft human tune. The twins increased their tricks, sending gusts of telekinetic force to knock over objects he had just fixed, hacking the light panels to flicker in chaotic rhythms, and even creating illusions of monstrous beasts charging toward him. Daniel didn't flinch. He moved methodically, almost as if he was ignoring their existence. This unexpected behavior caught them off guard. They were used to screams, scolding, or panicked retreats, but this man acted as if their chaos was nothing more than a minor inconvenience on a long work shift. In the surveillance chamber, the queen leaned forward on her throne, narrowing her eyes as she watched the scene unfold. The advisors whispered nervously. They had seen many react with terror, but this human's calm presence was new. Even the palace AI, which had calculated a 98% chance of him fleeing within 5 minutes, began running new probability models. The twins paused briefly, exchanging a glance that was both confused and intrigued. For the first time, their usual dominance over newcomers did not feel complete. Daniel's quiet persistence was not just unusual, it was unsettling to them. As the hours passed, the palace staff waited for the familiar explosion of chaos that always marked a nanny's defeat. But it never came. Daniel emerged at the end of his first shift covered in ink and feathers, his hair messy, but he walked out with a steady pace. No fear in his eyes. He didn't ask to quit, didn't demand new rules. He simply nodded to the guards and left as if it had been a normal day. The whispers in the palace turned into stunned silence. Some began to wonder if, for the first time in history, someone might actually last longer than a day inside the storm. First contact. Chaos versus calm. The twins were no ordinary children. Their alien lineage came from a race known for their heightened intellect, unstable energy abilities, and deep telepathic bonds. From the moment they were born, the palace systems had to be modified to contain their unpredictable powers. They were considered prodigies by their kind, but in the palace halls their names had become symbols of fear. After Daniel's first day, the twins retreated to their private chamber, exchanging a series of rapid telepathic thoughts. For the first time, they found themselves unsettled. The human had not panicked, he had not yelled, and he had not played into their traps like everyone else. They felt challenged, and their alien pride would not allow this anomaly to go untested. They decided that the next day would not just be another prank. It would be a full-scale assault meant to break him completely. The following morning, Daniel entered the nursery with the same calm expression he always carried. His cleaning cart squeaked softly as he pushed it inside. The moment the doors closed behind him, the temperature in the room dropped suddenly. The air shimmered with energy, and the twins appeared out of thin air, hovering upside down near the ceiling with mischievous grins stretched across their faces. They launched their first attack immediately, releasing dozens of small floating spheres that emitted high-pitched telepathic waves. These waves had driven previous nannies to cover their ears and flee in pain. But Daniel simply paused, took a deep breath, and began humming an old Earth lullaby. The slow rhythm of his voice clashed with the telepathic frequency, creating a strange resonance that caused the spheres to short out and fall like pebbles onto the floor. The twins exchanged a quick glance, surprised that their opening move had been neutralized so effortlessly. They did not stop there. The male twin teleported into the palace ventilation shafts, where he usually spent hours evading capture while triggering traps across different rooms. Meanwhile, the female twin activated a holographic illusion of collapsing walls, designed to confuse and terrify intruders. The entire room flickered with shifting structures and thunderous sounds as if the nursery itself were tearing apart. Daniel, however, didn't run or scream. He calmly extended the handle of his mop and tapped along the walls. Listening carefully for the difference in sound, he could tell where the real wall was and where the illusion began. Step by step, he navigated through the chaos until he reached the control node, cleverly hidden behind one of the play structures. With a precise movement, he disabled the illusion, and the room returned to normal. The female twin frowned, her glowing eyes narrowing. She had used this trick on battle-hardened guards and made them stumble in fear. Yet this human had unraveled it like solving a child's puzzle. Meanwhile, in the palace vents, the male twin moved swiftly, triggering maintenance drones to swarm Daniel's position. These drones had been reprogrammed by the twins to act like hunter machines, spinning their blades and emitting disorienting flashes. Daniel didn't panic. He reached into his cart, pulled out a bag of cleaning dust, and flung it into the air vents. The fine powder clogged the sensors of the drones, causing them to misfire and collide with one another. As the chaos unfolded inside the vents, Daniel followed a small trail of breadcrumbs he had left earlier along the hallway edges, a simple but clever method to track the teleporting twins' movement. Within minutes, he cornered the boy near the vent opening, not with weapons or threats, but with a patient stare that carried quiet authority. The twin blinked in confusion, expecting fear, but finding only calm determination staring back at him. High above in the surveillance chamber, the Queen and her advisors observed in silence. The Queen's sharp eyes softened ever so slightly as she watched Daniel maneuver through each challenge. He was not using technology or advanced alien methods. He was relying on observation, patience, and an unshakable sense of control. The twins had always dictated the game. But now, for the first time, someone was rewriting the rules. The advisors whispered nervously, unsure whether to intervene or let the situation unfold. The Queen raised her hand and silenced them. She wanted to see where this would go. The twins regrouped near the center of the nursery, their minds buzzing with thoughts. They had underestimated this human. They expected him to collapse like all the others, yet he had dismantled their tricks one by one with quiet, unexpected precision. For the first time, the two alien children, who had ruled their world through chaos, began to feel something they had never felt before. Curiosity mixed with a trace of respect. Daniel, standing in the middle of the now quiet room, adjusted his gloves, gave a slight nod, and returned to his work as if nothing extraordinary had happened. The twins floated silently above him, no longer just tricksters testing a new toy, but challengers facing an opponent they could not easily predict. The human method. In the days that followed, something began to shift inside the nursery. It was subtle at first, almost invisible to the watchful eyes of the palace staff, but for those who observed closely, the rhythm of chaos started to change. The twins, who once treated every caretaker like prey in a game, found themselves watching Daniel with a strange mix of fascination and frustration. He did not react the way anyone else had. He didn't shout when toys exploded or when rooms flipped upside down. He didn't beg for mercy when telepathic waves hit him, and he didn't retreat when the twins vanished into thin air to cause trouble elsewhere. He simply adapted, always a step behind but never defeated, like a quiet river carving through rock over time. Daniel's approach was unlike anything the alien palace had ever seen. Instead of relying on authority or fear, he introduced structure, something the twins had never experienced. On the third day, he entered their nursery not with defensive gear or complex alien tools, but with a simple human box filled with puzzle pieces, storybooks, and old Earth toys. The twins stared at the strange objects, tilting their heads in confusion. To them, play was always destructive, chaotic, a way to dominate their environment. But Daniel treated it as something else entirely. He placed the puzzle on the floor and began slowly fitting the pieces together, humming softly, completely ignoring their attempts to disrupt him. The twins tried levitating the puzzle pieces away, but Daniel calmly retrieved them and continued without a hint of frustration. After several minutes of being ignored, curiosity won over mischief. The female twin floated closer, her glowing eyes narrowing at the colorful pieces, and without realizing it, she hovered beside him, watching the image take shape. The following day, Daniel introduced them to what he called mission time. Each day he gave them a task that seemed like a game but was designed to teach discipline and cooperation. One day, it was stacking energy cubes into stable towers. Another day, it was navigating a moving obstacle course he built out of cleaning equipment and spare palace parts. At first, the twins mocked the simplicity of these tasks, using their powers to cheat or sabotage the challenges. But Daniel never scolded them. He simply reset the course and tried again, repeating the same activity until they either completed it properly or lost interest. This patience baffled them. In their world, failure was met with punishment or fear, but this human gave them endless chances, treating every mistake as part of the game rather than an end. As the days turned into a week, the palace guards began whispering about strange sights. For the first time, laughter, real, playful laughter, could be heard coming from the twins' chamber. It wasn't the mocking, telepathic laughter they used to humiliate nannies. It was light and unguarded, a sound that had never echoed through those walls before. Some staff even gathered near the surveillance screens during breaks just to watch Daniel's sessions. The queen herself began to observe more frequently, intrigued by this quiet transformation. Her children had never responded to anyone like this. They were always defiant, wild, and impossible to contain. But under the human janitor's guidance, they seemed engaged. Daniel also introduced something even more alien to them: stories. Each night before leaving, he sat near the edge of the nursery and read from old human children's books he had brought from Earth. He told tales of brave explorers, kind strangers, and families that stood together against darkness. The twins, at first pretending to ignore him, slowly began drifting closer each night until they sat at his feet, listening in silence. Their glowing eyes softened, and their chaotic energy dimmed during story time. It was as if, for the first time, someone wasn't trying to control them through power but was inviting them into something bigger, something warmer. Throughout all of this, Daniel never tried to act like a hero. He never demanded obedience, titles, or glory. He approached each day with quiet consistency, treating the alien children not as royal heirs or dangerous entities, but as two kids who needed boundaries and kindness. This disarmed them more effectively than any psychic shield or advanced nanny program ever had. In their world of complex power structures and fear-driven obedience, Daniel's simple human methods were like an entirely different language, one they couldn't manipulate easily, but one that began to resonate deep within them. The queen observed this change from her surveillance chamber with growing amazement. She saw her children solving puzzles instead of breaking them, completing tasks side by side, and sitting still to listen to stories for years. Her advisors had tried to impose control through strength and failed. But here was a man with no status, no power, and no training in royal childcare doing what none of them could. She didn't intervene. Not yet, because part of her wanted to see how far this human's strange methods could go. Deep down, a question began to stir in her heart, a question she had never dared to ask before. Was it possible that kindness, patience, and structure could achieve what force never could? The breaking point. As the days passed, the twins' relationship with Daniel grew in ways neither the palace nor the royal court could have predicted. What began as quiet curiosity had turned into a bond they couldn't explain. The twins, who once thrived on rebellion and chaos, now looked forward to his daily missions and his evening stories. Yet, beneath their playful mischief, something else was brewing. The twins were not used to feeling attached. They had always been forces of their own will, untamed and feared. Now they felt a strange warmth whenever Daniel entered the room. It made them curious, but it also made them uneasy. In their young alien minds, affection was unfamiliar territory, and unfamiliar feelings often gave rise to one thing: resistance. They decided, almost instinctively, to test the strength of this bond in their own way, not through simple pranks, but through a challenge that would either push Daniel away like everyone else or prove he was truly different. On the 12th day, the palace awoke to a quiet unease. The usual morning routines were disrupted by sudden flickers in the power grid, corridor alarms activating without cause, and royal systems displaying strange messages in the twins' cryptic telepathic language. By the time Daniel arrived for his daily shift, the atmosphere inside the palace had changed entirely. Guards rushed through hallways, engineers tried to stabilize the core systems, and even the queen had summoned her advisors into an emergency meeting. At the center of this carefully orchestrated chaos were the twins. They had slipped past the standard nursery boundaries by overriding the palace locks with their combined psychic energy, something previously thought impossible for their age, and had disappeared into the palace infrastructure, leaving only traces of telepathic echoes behind. Daniel didn't panic. He calmly listened to the reports, studied the strange messages flashing across the monitors, and pieced together what was happening. Unlike everyone else, he didn't view this as an act of rebellion meant to harm. He understood that the twins were making a statement, testing if he would chase them, give up, or treat this as just another game. His quiet certainty unnerved the palace staff who expected him to fail. He collected his basic tools, slung his satchel across his shoulder, and began tracking them through the palace. He knew their patterns better than anyone now. He recognized the small telepathic imprints they left like breadcrumbs, and he could tell when their mischievous energy shifted into something more dangerous. The twins had not just escaped for fun. They had chosen the palace's most unstable area, the gravitational core chamber, a massive cylindrical structure at the center of the floating palace, where the artificial gravity field was generated and regulated. It was a place no nanny or outsider had ever dared to enter. The shifting gravity made it unpredictable, and the twins had reconfigured parts of the system to behave like a giant puzzle maze. Whole corridors tilted sideways, floors spun like wheels, and doors opened into strange inverted spaces. Daniel entered the chamber without hesitation, gripping the railings as the ground shifted beneath his feet. His heartbeat was steady, his eyes focused. He navigated through spinning corridors, dodged unstable energy bursts, and used nothing but his wits to stabilize platforms long enough to cross them. As he ventured deeper, the twins watched from a high vantage point, their glowing eyes peering through the distortion fields. This was their final test. They wanted to see if the human who had been patient with their games would still stand firm when everything became dangerous and unpredictable. They manipulated gravity fields to hurl objects his way, reversed directional pulls to make him stumble, and created illusory paths that ended in sudden drops. Daniel, however, treated every obstacle like another puzzle, adjusting, observing, and pushing forward without shouting. He didn't treat their actions like betrayal. He treated it like a challenge they needed him to overcome. Eventually, he reached the heart of the chamber where the twins hovered near the unstable gravity regulators, energy swirling around them like a storm. Any wrong move could cause a catastrophic palace-wide failure. Instead of yelling at them or trying to pull them down, Daniel slowly walked toward them through the shifting gravity, his steps deliberate and unwavering. The twins expected anger, they expected commands, but instead they saw calm determination. His voice carried through the humming energy field, not loud, but steady. He didn't speak like a commander giving orders. He spoke like a father addressing his children. He told them that games had rules, that every storm must meet a steady hand, and that no matter how far they ran, he would always walk toward them, never away. The twins froze, their energy faltering for a moment. They had never heard anyone speak to them like that. Not their tutors, not the guards, not even their mother. They saw no fear in his eyes, no desperation, only a quiet certainty that anchored the chaos around them. Slowly, their powers calmed, the swirling field softened, and they descended toward him without a word. The palace engineers who had been watching from the control room were stunned as gravity levels stabilized across the palace. Daniel didn't celebrate. He simply reached out and gently took their hands, guiding them out of the chamber as if nothing extraordinary had happened. That night, the palace whispered about what they had witnessed. No one had ever brought the twins back from such a dangerous situation without force, threats, or sedation. The queen stood silently in the surveillance chamber long after everyone else had left. Watching the replay of the moment, Daniel faced her children in the heart of the storm. For the first time in many years, she felt something she could not name, a quiet, growing respect, and deep within the twins' hearts, though they didn't admit it even to each other, a realization began to take root. This human was not like anyone else, and perhaps, for the first time, they didn't want him to leave. The moment that changed everything. The palace had known chaos for years, but after that day in the gravity chamber, something irreversible shifted. It wasn't loud, it wasn't immediate, but it was real and undeniable. The twins who once carried the storm wherever they went returned from the core chamber not with triumphant grins, but with quiet, thoughtful expressions. Their usual telepathic chatter between themselves grew softer, less like scheming conspirators and more like children exchanging secrets they didn't fully understand. The palace guards who once flinched at the mere sound of their laughter now found themselves watching them in awe, unsure whether to trust the change or believe it was another elaborate prank. But it wasn't a prank. Something deep within the twins had been touched, something that none of their alien tutors or powerful caretakers had ever reached. In the following days, Daniel noticed the difference immediately. The twins no longer greeted him with instant mischief the moment he entered the nursery. Instead, they hovered near him silently, observing him the way a child might observe a star they couldn't quite understand. Their energy still crackled beneath the surface, unpredictable and wild, but it no longer came from a place of defiance. Instead, it carried the weight of curiosity and trust. When Daniel set up their daily missions, they didn't sabotage them as they once had. They participated, sometimes playfully bending the rules, but no longer to make him fail. More and more often, they waited for his approval after completing a task, eager to see his subtle nod or quiet smile, gestures that held more meaning for them than the royal accolades they had grown numb to. One evening, as the palace lights dimmed to a soft violet glow, Daniel entered the nursery to find both twins sitting by the large star window, their small figures silhouetted against the endless sea of stars beyond. Usually, at this hour, they were preparing new traps or hacking palace systems to cause late-night chaos, but tonight they were silent. Their glowing eyes reflected the starlight, and their telepathic whispers drifted softly through the air like a half-formed question. When Daniel approached, they didn't look at him with challenge. They simply shifted aside to make space. As if inviting him to sit with them, he did so without hesitation, lowering himself onto the floor beside them. For several minutes, no one spoke. The hum of the palace engines filled the silence, steady and low like a heartbeat. Then, without warning, the female twin floated closer and placed her small, clawed hand on his sleeve, a gesture that no one in the palace had ever seen from either child. The male twin followed, leaning against Daniel's arm with the innocent weight of someone who had never known the meaning of comfort. They didn't say anything, but their telepathic bond reached out to him, not as a weapon or a test, but as a quiet, fragile connection. For the first time, they allowed him into their shared mental space, and he felt their emotions. Curiosity, confusion, and beneath it all, a yearning they couldn't name. It wasn't the overwhelming psychic force that had driven so many nannies insane. It was gentle, hesitant, like a child extending their hand for the first time. Daniel didn't push into their minds or try to control it. He simply opened himself with calm acceptance, letting them sense his steady warmth. High above, in the Queen's private chamber, she watched the scene unfold on the silent surveillance feed. She had watched countless nannies fail, countless caretakers run away screaming, and countless advisors give up on her children. But this was something entirely different. She saw her children, her unstoppable, uncontrollable heirs, sit beside a human janitor as if he were their anchor in the vastness of space. She saw them lean into him as if he were part of their world in a way no one else had been. For years, she had believed that control could only come through power, discipline, and fear. But here was a man who had done what she never could by offering neither control nor fear, but consistency, kindness, and presence. For a queen who had ruled through strength alone, the realization struck her deeply, leaving her silent long after the feed had ended. The twins began to follow Daniel's routines outside the nursery as well, when he walked through the palace halls. They sometimes trailed behind him at a distance, floating silently like twin shadows. The guards were stunned to see them quietly carrying his tools or imitating his motions as he worked. They even began to intervene when others tried to mock him, their once mischievous telepathic abilities now used to silence disrespect rather than sow chaos. It was as if their boundless energy had finally found direction, not through force, but through the human who refused to give up on them. In that quiet, star-filled night by the window, something unspoken solidified. Daniel had crossed a threshold no one else had ever reached. He was no longer just a caretaker in their eyes. He had become something far rarer, something the twins didn't fully understand but instinctively trusted. And that trust changed everything. Legacy of the Janitor. Weeks turned into months, and the transformation that began in a single chaotic nursery spread quietly through the entire alien palace. The twins, once infamous across the galaxy for driving every caretaker to madness, became the living proof of something the alien empire had never truly believed in. Human resilience shaped not through dominance, but through unwavering presence. Daniel continued his work each day without fanfare, moving through the palace halls in the same gray uniform, pushing his cleaning cart, fixing what was broken, and guiding the twins through their daily tasks with patience that seemed endless. He didn't seek titles, he didn't demand recognition. He simply showed up, day after day, like a star that refused to fade no matter how dark the night became. The palace staff who had once whispered about his inevitable failure now watched him with quiet respect. Some even adjusted their own behavior around the twins, no longer treating them like unpredictable terrors, but as children capable of learning. The twins followed him everywhere now, not because they were ordered to, but because they wanted to. When Daniel repaired light fixtures in the hallways, they floated beside him, handing him tools and mimicking his movements with clumsy seriousness. When he taught them new Earth games, they played with intensity, not to break the rules, but to master them. Their telepathic laughter, once sharp and cruel, now echoed through the palace like a melody, and it changed the way people walked through those corridors. Even the most hardened guards found themselves softening when the twins appeared, remembering the days when they had been untouchable forces of chaos and seeing how different they had become under Daniel's quiet guidance. The Queen had watched this transformation in silence, observing from her throne and private chambers. Her pride and power often conflicted with the growing realization that something profoundly human had achieved what all her alien authority could not. Her advisors urged her to claim the change as her own, to declare some grand royal reform to save face, but she refused. Deep inside, She understood that this transformation didn't come from decrees or threats. It came from the janitor who had walked into the storm when everyone else ran away. One evening, she summoned Daniel to the great throne hall. The massive chamber glittered with crystalline light. Nobles lined the walls, and the twins floated beside her throne with expressions of excitement they could barely hide. Daniel walked forward, calm as always, his presence unchanged by the grandeur surrounding him. The queen rose from her throne, her tall, elegant figure framed by the shimmering light, and in front of the entire royal court, she did something no one had expected. She descended the steps and stood before him, not as a distant ruler, but as a mother whose children had finally found peace. Her voice carried across the chamber as she spoke of the chaos that had plagued her palace for years, of the countless failures of the most elite caretakers in the galaxy, and of the human janitor who had accomplished what no one else had dared. She announced that Daniel would no longer be simply a worker in the palace. He would become the royal guardian of the heirs, a title never before given to a non-alien. His role would not be to control them, but to continue guiding them, teaching them, and standing by them as they grew into the leaders the Empire needed. The nobles were stunned, some even murmured in protest. But their objections faded quickly as the twins floated forward and, without hesitation, took Daniel's hands in front of everyone. Their glowing eyes were filled with trust and pride. The entire chamber fell silent at the sight. For the first time in living memory, the alien heirs had chosen someone on their own. Not out of fear, not out of manipulation, but out of genuine bond. The queen watched this with a softened gaze, knowing deep inside that this moment would be remembered for generations. Over time, the story of the human janitor spread far beyond the palace walls. It reached distant worlds, echoing through the interstellar networks. Some dismissed it as a legend, others as a strange cultural curiosity. But among many, it became a story of quiet strength, of how a single human with no power, no title, and no weapons had changed the course of an empire simply by refusing to give up. Children across alien colonies began reenacting the janitor and the twins as a game, pretending to clean palace halls while taming imaginary alien heirs. Diplomats began citing the tale as proof that humans were more than just another species in the galactic hierarchy. They were something unpredictable, something steady, something that could reach hearts others could not. And through it all, Daniel never let the attention change him. He remained who he had always been, walking the halls with quiet steps, humming old Earth tunes, cleaning messes both literal and metaphorical, always there when the twins stumbled, always steady when they pushed the limits. The twins grew, their powers matured, but their bond with him only deepened. They saw him not as a servant or a guardian, but as the unshakable center of their chaotic universe. The queen often stood at the palace balcony at night, watching the stars, knowing that one man had altered not only the future of her children, but the perception of an entire empire. She whispered a quiet thanks to the stars for sending him to her palace, and though Daniel never sought glory, his legacy was already etched into the fabric of history, not through grand speeches or victories in war, but through quiet persistence, human warmth, and the simple act of never walking away.